Senator Kamala Harris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. This really is a birthday for me because you have come out of the gates firing. In fact, Donald Trump apparently said you were the best opening so far. That's what he said. He was like, she was great, so great. Came out firing.
He likes big crowds.
He does, but I mean, if even he was impressed, what do you think you've done right to begin your journey as a presidential candidate for the Democrats?
Oh, well, I think that coming out the gate speaking truth about how America really needs a fighter for truth and justice in this country, which are right now under attack. Truth and justice are under attack. I think it's about also fighting for the opportunity in America that's lost for so many people. But coming out of the gate in Oakland, California, the place of my birth, and talking about the fact that we are better than this as a country. And I think we all know that, and we want folks who are going to fight for the best of who we are. So it's been a good beginning, it's been a strong beginning, and I hope to continue on this path.
That's exciting. It's an exciting journey. Exciting beginning. Since this is the beginning, and you know, I read the book and I've learned so much about you now, there are so many things that people do want to know about you. I think the most important is, how do people pronounce your name? Because people argue about this all the time. Is it Harris or is it Harris?
It's Harris.
No, but seriously, everyone goes like, is it Kamala or is it Kamala or is it
Kamala. Just think of a comma and then add a la.
Kamala.
There you go. Kamala.
I like that.
There you are.
It's like long A. And what I didn't know from the book is that you grew up in a household where, for the most part of your life, you were raised by a single mother who is Indian, but she raised you in Black America.
Yes.
You went to civil rights speeches, you went to marches with her. Has that shaped a lot of how you see the world, growing up in a household where you were in a Black community, but at the same time had multiple cultural influences?
Well, sure. I mean, you and I were both raised by very strong mothers. You
Right.
know, my mother was all of 5 feet tall, but after meeting her, you would have thought she was 7 feet tall.
Right.
And my mother was one of the smartest, the toughest, and the most loving people I've ever known. And she was a fighter. She was a breast cancer researcher. She had 2 goals in her life: to raise her 2 daughters and end breast cancer.
Wow.
And she would take us to the lab with her on the weekends and after work, and her whole vision of life, and I adopted that vision, was of what can be, unburdened by what has been. Knowing what can be in a way that we improve human condition, and seeing, even though we have not seen it before, seeing the potential in human beings and in our future. And that's how our mother raised us. And she was active in the civil rights movement. That's where my parents met. You know, we joked that we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full-time marching and shouting.
Right.
About this thing called justice. And my mother knew that she was raising her 2 daughters into a world that would present obstacles and would not necessarily get us, but my mother raised us to understand, and she would say, don't you let anyone tell you who you are, you tell them who you are.
Wow.
And
I always wondered. I mean, I know that you love your country, and I know that there is oftentimes a call that people feel to ascribe to a larger goal. You know, I want to be president. I want to be that. But why did you want to get into this line of work? I mean, you know, to have a mom who's trying to cure breast cancer, and you go, no, I want to go into being a district attorney. I want to go into public office. Why?
Well, when I was growing up in that environment, it was a very rich environment. It was an active environment. And the heroes in the civil rights movement, among many, were the lawyers. It was Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston and Constance Baker Motley, and these individuals who understood the skill of the profession of law to translate the passion from the streets to the courtrooms of our country. And do that work of reminding folks, and we know it must continually be done, reminding folks of the promise we articulated in 1776, that we are all and should be treated as equals. And so I decided that's the work I wanted to do, that was noble, important work, and I went to law school. And then out of law school, I made the decision to become a prosecutor. And I will tell you, you can probably imagine, my sister went on, for example, to head the ACLU. When I made a decision to become a prosecutor, folks thought it was a curious decision.
Yeah, I can imagine.
With some of my family, I had to defend the decision like one would a thesis. But what I said, truly, but what I said is that when we want to reform systems, and I was born knowing the failures and the problems with the criminal justice system in America. But I also believed then, as I do now, that when we want to reform these systems that need and must be reformed, that we have a role to play on the inside as well as on the outside.
Right.
And so that's the decision I made. And it was a decision to be able to then do things as I did when I was DA. I was elected the first woman and the first woman of color to be district attorney of San Francisco and the first woman of color in the state of California.
Right.
When I was then later... Thank you. When I was later elected Attorney General of California, I was elected as the first woman and the first person of color ever to be the Attorney General of the biggest state in the country. And in that position, having the power that comes with the position, I was able to champion reform like had really not existed before. When I was District Attorney Trevor of San Francisco, I started a reentry initiative focused on young men who had been arrested for drug sales.
Right.
Getting them jobs and counseling and then dismissing the charges against them. This was back in 2004 when I became DA. People would say to me, why are you letting people out when you should be locking people up? People would say to me, I would talk to other DAs, this is a smart way to do business. We need to stop the revolving door. Let's incorporate and embrace that concept of redemption. Right? The idea people will make mistakes, they should be held accountable, but let's let them earn their way back, right? You know, this is what Mandela talked about so much.
Right.
Right? And so I would start these programs, I'd talk with other DAs, hey, let's do reentry initiatives. They'd say, what is reentry? What does that mean? That's not our job. Our job is not to get people services. Why are you getting people jobs when they've committed crimes? And I'd say because it's the smart thing to do, plus the war on drugs was a complete failure. And we need to have a different approach to how we do business.
Let's talk a little bit about that different approach. The journey you've been on has been unique because you started as a prosecutor.
Right.
You were in a position where you had to put people in prison. You had to enforce the law.
Right.
But you've come under criticism recently where people say you had some programs that some feel targeted minorities or communities that didn't have the means. You know, for instance, truancy programs where mothers were threatened with prison because their children weren't going to school or weren't where they were supposed to be. When you look at your past, I know what you're proposing now, but what do you think was the biggest thing that changed the way you saw criminal justice reform? Do you think it's just a time thing, or do your views continue to evolve as you learn?
Well, okay, first let me say this. I will never regret having prosecuted people who molested children, people who raped women, people who murdered other individuals. Those are serious crimes for which I believe there should be serious punishment. And I'm never going to apologize for that. And I think most people would agree that when one human being harms another human being, especially those who are weak and vulnerable, that there should be serious and severe consequence and accountability. We also know, and I was born knowing, that this system of criminal justice in this country needs reform. It has been biased. There is systemic racism. We have had a policy in place in this country that has led to mass incarceration, where we have incarcerated more people per capita than any other civilized or advanced, so-called advanced country, and it needs to be reformed. I will say to you that over the years, one of the benefits that I believe the system received and that helped me do the work that I was able to accomplish was because of the incredible activism and smart activism of folks like the folks who are Black Lives Matters, the folks who were involved on the outside saying and demanding that the system would change, demanding and marching and advocating, because that activism allowed me to then be able to do some of the work that I accomplished. I could not have done anything that I did without that level of organized, smart activism on the outside. And we have thankfully evolved, but there's a lot more to do.
Right.
There's a lot more to do. I believe, first of all, that we have got to continue on sentencing reform. We have a Department of Justice led by this administration that has shut down consent decrees, where there should be supervision of police departments that have proven to be engaged in racist or in in systematic kind of targeting of people of color.
Right.
This administration has shut down the pattern and practice investigations of police departments around the country that are engaged in a pattern and practice of discrimination. We've got to change what we're doing right now.
Let me ask you this: How do you change that as a commander-in-chief and leader of the country while still making police and people who love the police feel like you are a candidate who believes in law and order? Because that's one piece of framing that President Trump has done exceptionally well, is he's gone and said the Democrats love crime, the Democrats hate police. So how do you say to the police, hey, we're going to come after you essentially for the things that you've done wrong, but at the same time, we still respect the police force? How do you balance that?
Well, it's in my mind, it's simple, but I agree. He has created this false choice and this paradigm that suggests that he really doesn't understand who communities are. When your grandmother's house gets burglarized, when you have a family member who has been victimized, you want to know that you can be able to pick up the phone and call police and they're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And so it is a mistake and a myth to suggest that certain communities don't want police. They do. What they don't want, and what no community should want, is excessive force, racial profiling, and unequal application or enforcement of the law.
Right.
But so we have to reconcile these points. And in fact, that's why when I was Attorney General, one of the issues that I worked on, and we created the first of its kind in the nation, training for police officers on implicit bias and procedural justice, and brought together leaders in law enforcement as well as leaders in the civil rights community to say, look, we have got to deal with the fact that when you carry a gun, when you have the ability to enforce the law, which means to pull somebody over, to stop them, to arrest them, you got to check where the bias is kicking in, and you got to recognize that it's there. And that if we're not going to deal with it, there's going to be uneven application of the law, and injustice results because of that. And so there is work to be done, but we have to have an understanding also that this president has suggested that so many issues are issues about national security and public safety that are a figment of his imagination, and including the vanity project called The Wall, and his suggestion that there are terrorists who are invading the country, and for that reason, suggesting that we should have a concrete wall from sea to sea.